the slides have a loose connection to what I'm saying, just to warn you. First I want to introduce myself and what I'm doing. I'm a psychologist, psychotherapist, so I'm not a scholar of religion, so I might have a slightly different approach. So, as a psychotherapist, of course, I'm always confronted with the issue of meaning. When patients come to me and they're desperate about their lives, about their background, they talk about issues, they talk about what they've experienced, they talk about their past. And I, as a psychotherapist, then, of course, do what a psychotherapist should do, listens, is empathetic, but actually often lost for answers. So, what are myths? What are myths? And I think it's important that we define myths the way I define it in a certain way. I think myths are the big stories which hold societies together. So there's stories which we unconsciously identify with, stories which we kind of believe in, but often are not aware of. So these are myths. So myths, for me, have a certain function, a function society. So when we refer to challenges, we kind of unconsciously refer to these big stories in society. Of course, these stories always change. They don't remain the same. And maybe every couple of years, another story comes up, which is then in the center. Currently, there is one story which I think, or one myth which I think is very dominant and which I experience as in education, as being a professor of education, a story that is digitalisation, the digital world. Now, what is it about? If you look at schools, you see all the children with tablets. Teachers don't exist anymore. They're just coaches in the background. So the notion behind this digitalisation is we can solve any problem by tuning into the universal knowledge. So we don't need any personal knowledge. We don't need any kind of process which just can Google or which just can tune into what is that unknown. And that increases our intelligence, and that makes us actually very potent to solve any issue, any problem with it. So I think this is one big myth. And it's interesting. Myths, modern myths, they're usually not questions, and I think they often point to the future. We can change this, maybe another one, whatever one wants. They point to the future, so they point to a possible development of society. And I think this is one big myth, which then, of course, digitalization leads to a lot of changes, leads to lots of improvements. So it kind of gives a meaningful to many people in their work. Now, the problem, the basic notion of digitalization is that it's all about the right information and algorithms. It's all about that. And if you got the right information and you can obtain that, that's actually when you have solved the issue or met the challenge. The problem is that in order to meet challenges, problems, or issues, it's not just a question of the right information, it's also a question of values. It's also a question of personality. It's also a question of morals. So that's being avoided in this kind. Now, maybe we could compare this with the notion of the primordial existence or pre-modern times. And there's a lot of being written about it, a lot of fantasy, a lot of projections, of course, but probably in primordial times, human beings, or we were more exposed to the world, exposed to nature, exposed, to challenges, problems which we failed to have reasoning, failed to understand. So when there was a tempest, it might be the gods, or it might be something else. So when there was a flood, it might. So actually, the world was full of riddles, the world was full of mysteries, and which one failed really to understand. And what did it do to the mind? What did it do to our thinking? And I think there, it's interesting, if you look at neuroscience, Solms, I think, is a great neuroscientist, he's at the same time a psychoanalyst, he says, well, our thinking expands, gets greater, and our consciousness expands when there's an irritation, when there's something which we kind of desperately seek for an answer, something which we can't understand, that's when we get more conscious. That's when we get more aware. Understanding leads to confinement, leads to more power, of course, but at the same time we get there's a closure on what. So actually, maybe pre-modern times, maybe there's one psychologist who makes that statement, maybe human beings were in some sense more aware of the world, more intelligent, maybe if you use that term, because they had all these riddles, all these mysteries, all these challenges which kind of made them thinking. And there's some example when you read something which goes in that direction where you could see. So digitalisation or this modern myth might lead to a reduced awareness, might lead to being more confined or more kind of to not be so aware or not so see as many things as one did before. Maybe, but that's a hypothesis. Now, when I work with patients, of course, a lot of difficult issues have to be discussed. The past, pain, emotions. And now you compare this to finding a meaning. How do you find a meaning in life? And this has been said many times. Meaning you find when you have a sense that is of otherness, connection to something other, something more sublime, an authority, something which kind of gives you a sense, a determination. I think that's when you have a meaning. Now, to find a meaning, of course, needs a process. To find a meaning is not something you just can do, you just can look it up somewhere, you can Google it, oh, now I've got my meaning, but it means kind of a deeper process where the body, the mind, the emotion, intuition, imagination, everything is included. I think that's what is important for meaning. You then might find a meaning, or you might not. So meaning actually finds you, and not you're the one who can actually construct a meaning. That's a very important. So that means you never know if you can find a meaning, but when you found it, you're overwhelmed, you're sure of yourself, you think that's it, and that empowers you. James Hillman would say, finding meaning, when you want to find a meaning, it needs a trip to the underworld. Now, what is the underworld? That's a kind of a term which psychoanalysts like to use. The underworld means you go back in everything which is inside of you, in the inner world. You try to find, difficult issues. You try to find experience you've got which might have hurt you. If you now look at psychotherapy again, you see that one big issue is, of course, trauma. So half of the people, more the people who come to me, they struggle with their lives, they struggle with their profession, and then we talk and we fantasize, and of course you also lose body emotions, and then they start detecting a trauma, an event which actually disturbed them, an event which actually touched them, moved them, and it's very interesting. When you work with the trauma, you find the trauma, you have to work through the trauma. You have to kind of face the trauma. And so, but the question is, did the trauma really occur? Now, there's a lot of research done it. Most traumas are fantasies. Most traumas are imagined. And the first person who was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder because he was in the Vietnam War. One found out later he was not in the Vietnam War, never. But he had actually killed himself. He was traumatized. So what does it mean? I think finding meaning means a process, and into the underworld, that's a way we try to find meaning. So it said, but, and I think this has not been said yet, it also can be very painful. Because, when you do work as a psychotherapist, pain is also there. Struggle is there. Desperateness. And you have to expose yourself. You have to expose yourself to issues which are unpleasant. So it's not just something, like smooth talk. And I think it's also, you can't be a psychotherapist when you're just being empathetic, just nodding, then understanding, okay, I see, I'm here to listen to you. That's not sufficient. And I've found in my work, and this is what I'm also trying to do in mythodrama, sometimes in order to help someone to find meaning, you have to provoke. You have to say things which might even not be quite politically correct. I worked a lot with juveniles, who were aggressive, were sent to the police, and not every 18-year-old juvenile wants to work with a psychologist and talk about his problems. Some of them think it's a waste of time. But I found out a way to reach them is when I kind of wake them up, provoke them. For instance, they would say, well, listen, I don't know if I work with you. I only work with winners. You seem like a failure. Now, as a psychotherapist, you shouldn't do this, You shouldn't create, but it's interesting. Suddenly other energy comes. Suddenly they get more present. Suddenly they're here and they say, wait a minute, I'm not a failure. I want to prove something to you. And you feel this diving into the emotions. They might even stand up. Hey, what are you saying? That's a bit, I have to watch out. So, but that's when you feel you get deeper. And that's when you can start working on meaning. So I think it's very important to see meaning is not an issue with, you can't find meaning in an esoteric way. It's a struggle. And a struggle where you have to tune in. Inside, maybe that's a modern way of trying to find meaning, but there's another problem. I think the personal, and David, I think, said the same, or someone else said the same, the personal is overestimated. It's taken too important in psychotherapy, in psychology. It's often not about the personal. It's also a question of tuning in to one of the big stories which are around, tuning into culture, or tuning in to the place you come from. I remember working with a patient, and he came from the Emmental. Now, you all know the Emmental, of course. I hope you did your... Emmental is a small valley with a lot of hills. And at the beginning he had problems, but at the end we talked about the Emmental, that place his father, grandfather, and then so originated. And he could derive from the hills, because I have a lot of hills and houses on hills, so you have to go up a hill and then down a hill and up and down a hill. He derived, he saw it as a symbol of his life. So when you work, I think, to find meaning, you don't just have to concentrate on the personal, but also on the surrounding, on mythology, perhaps on religion, on history, on ancestors, which are very important too, in order to help someone to find a way for the meaning. So, I'm finished. Yeah, okay, a bit early.
Thank you for this insight in how a psychiatrist works. Thank you very much. Meaning is struggle. But at the same time, we are more and more buffered and less open and less porous. So how do we reconcile, how do we realize that the problem is that we're too buffered? We don't actually have to struggle because we're taken care of by external forces.
I think that's an important point, and I think, that's what you have to watch out. I think it was a very good point. I don't know who made that, because we are buffered. What you do is actually you expose yourself to other influences. And what happens now that you're completely buffered, I do it, for instance, by walking through towns and listening to everything, the sounds and the scents, the smells, and letting someone reflect on that. And I find that kind of opens the mind, otherwise we're just so goal-orientated and buffered, yes.
There is a difference between being open, you decide to accept, and being porous, accepting that the world seeps in. So it's not enough just to be open. You have to be open to things coming to you.
Exactly. You have to be ready to distract yourself. because distraction is a very important tool, a very important way to find some other meanings. And we tend to devalue distraction. In the distractive mode actually opens the mind, and often the concentrated mode closes the mind.
I liked your idea about the myth of digitization. I think it was T.S. Eliot who wrote, "Where is the knowledge that is lost in information, and where is the wisdom that is lost in knowledge?"
It's a very good quote, yeah.
Are we in the grips of digitization, or can we master it?
I hope we can master it. Maybe there's counter movements, of course, but I think it's a bit of a problem, that the belief in information and having the right information. I think every situation has components which are different, so we have to be able to trust our imagination, emotions, body, everything in order to find the solution, and not just Google it. Or look it up, or as when you write a scientific journal, you go and Google Scholar and you find. So it's kind of you close yourself in. We're living in a bubble.
Thank you.
That's a big danger.
I'll come to when I believe I have a trauma.
Okay, I haven't.
And you will tell me I'm a failure.
Yeah.